This is Changeling the podcast.
Welcome to Changeling the podcast, where the spring court always rains and the winter court always snows. Because it is the dead of winter here and it is frickin' cold in this bit of the world. I am your host, Puka, and I am joined by Fetch. Greetings, Fetch.
We're real? I thought this whole podcast was a urban legend.
Wouldn't that be great if, the podcast just became this thing that was talked about in hushed whispers, behind the bleachers after school, and kids are like, "Did you hear about Changeling the podcast?" Or there's people standing on the street corner with trench coats, and they're like, "Hey, kid, you want to listen to some podcast?"
I hear that if you disconnect your internet connection just as you're loading up Spotify, it will immediately begin playing Changeling the podcast. It happened to my cousin.
I mean, if that were the case, we would probably get a lot more listeners. But yeah, we are kicking off 2026 and season 5 today. We're kind of going, I guess, a step back a little bit because we're starting with general New World of Darkness first edition books, so pre-Chronicles. And the first one that we're looking at today, Urban Legends, actually came out before Changeling the Lost. So we're kind of stepping back in order to step forward, covering some ground that is yet untrod. I mean, I think this is a good one to sink our teeth into.
I am excited to cover urban legends. I love the old blue books for New World of Darkness. They have a lot of great ideas, and I'm happy to say that Urban Legends, a book which I had only skimmed before, has a lot of surprisingly well-aged content.
Like a fine wine. Yeah, and technically, even though it's not designed to be integrated into Lost, conceptually, Urban Legends folds well into Fae stuff, so I think this one was kind of well suited for that.
Ideas from
Uh,
here might be useful to players who are making use of the extensive tale crafting system that we covered in an earlier episode.
ugh. That system which I was not fond of, but yes, agreed.
Or for people who weren't fond of the idea, you could just use this to come up with new ideas for changelings, hobgoblins, or even the good folk.
Although honestly, this cover, it looks more like this girl is stoked to be meeting her shock rock idol than the manifestation of a vengeance spirit in a mirror, but it's cool, I guess. It has that horror vibe.
It's a woman in a bathroom looking at what is presumably Bloody Mary, a woman in ragged clothes with ragged hair, gnarly teeth, whited out eyes, and blood pouring down her cheeks, reaching out to grab this presumably terrified woman who has just the most photogenic expression on her face. I've never
Oh my
seen somebody.
god!
It's Bloody Mary! She's actually.
I don't know that mirrors work like this either. It looks like she's kind of in two places. Maybe it's her doppelganger. Maybe we're seeing her doppelganger in the mirror.
There's a few things that are odd about this one. If you look at the faucets, they are strangely photorealistic. I'm guessing that at least part of this is painted over a photograph.
Yeah, potentially. Well, the cover in this case is by Becky Jolinston, so Becky, let us know. So we have this back blurb here where it says, "Whispers carry the stories through the generations, so unreal that people no longer believe. Legend. They do not realize that legends can be more real than real." Which is a pretty over-the-top kind of presentation, but then it says, "This book includes inspiration for a game intended for mortal characters, but a game just as frightening and bizarre for monstrous characters. In the world of darkness, the truth behind urban legends is even more frightening, sinister, mysterious than you would imagine. Explore them at your gaming table. A great prequel or addition to Vampire, Werewolf, and Mage Chronicles." So I guess it was before Promethean as well.
While I don't think that it's obvious from chapter to chapter how these work as prequel adventures, I do think that the hyperbolic. This is early on in New World of Darkness when they're trying to establish how weird the setting is.
Hmm.
So something like this is pretty cool.
And the notion of a bridge between mortal game and supernatural game is one that I can get behind, and have done for some games, especially things like Mage, where it's a little bit more straightforward to do like mortal life and build upon that. But that is much more baked into New World of Darkness because you start with mortals and then you kind of layer things over that. So yeah, I agree. This is a good way to get into the idea of the world at large for everybody is weird and unsettling, mortal or otherwise. So this book is by Alan Alexander, Russell Bailey, Rick Chillot, Chillout, I don't know, Will Hindmarch, Luke Johnson, Amber E. Scott, and Malcolm Shepard. Thanks, everybody. And then we get into eggs, which is I guess content warning.
Yes, I try to do content warnings for the beginning of every chapter.
Hmm.
For this one, expect body horror, insects,
Pregnancy drama.
yes, lots of blood.
Yeah,
I could go on, but instead I am ready to summarize the story that we get taken on.
go for it.
Joseph is I couldn't tell if he's a PR man or marketing or something else.
Hmm.
But his job that he takes on is to help stop these wild rumors about insects being ground up into this popular tea. His wife, who likes the tea, she gets pregnant. The feeling of pregnancy is likened to alienation, like bugs beneath her skin. She absolutely hates it, and it is destroying her life. Joseph goes to talk to a doctor who is quick to say that yes, the idea of there being bugs included in tea is a possible problem, and how it goes into detail about how it might affect people. But Joseph continues his investigation, encounters a young woman who claims that her missing body parts and damaged face are because of the insects that are in the tea. So he's doing a lot of investigation. It gets weird though. The woman is deeply disturbed and thinks that the creatures talk to her and that they're from the stars. She holds out a bundle to Joseph, but we don't see it. I got the impression this was maybe her arm, but I don't think they ever clarify it.
I think, yeah, that was the implication.
We get a hard cut to being in the hospital after a miscarriage, which is maybe the hardest scene in the story to deal with. When Joseph gets home, he discovers that somebody has covered up all the harm to his house, that all the damage from the pregnancy's miscarriage is just gone. He literally stumbles across a strange egg that's warm and vibrates. He finds it fascinating, and I'll leave the rest to the reader.
Yeah. It's pretty gross and creepy with body horror and creature horror. I have to say, though, this guy's a terrible marital communicator for the sake of exposition in this story. He's like, hey, wife, let me tell you in detail about this thing you hate, and then bring up that you hate it, but keep going anyway. It's like, what is with this guy? But yeah,
I like the ending.
yeah, no, it's suitably creepy. I had a conversation earlier today about the kind of horror that I find actually horrific, and this is a pretty. I was squicked.
Same here. I have a hard time with blood, gore, and body horror. Three things that I also enjoy seeing in my game books.
Hmm.
Brain is a mysterious and troubling thing. Oh my goodness, I just noticed that the coffee mug on the final page is a vampire coffee
Yes.
mug.
Novelty Vampire the Requiem coffee mug with bug. So yeah, then we get into it. I noticed a few editing errors through here and it just kind of bugged me. Where it's like for use with the World of Darkness rulebook. All right.
Do you have any idea what this special thanks is for? Goes out to Pat Quinn and the students of SEQA 309Z. White Wolf project at the Atlanta campus for the Savannah College of Art and Design for allowing us to show them how things work in the quote unquote real world.
I'm going to assume that they did some kind of course at SCAD, Savannah College of Art and Design. That was like a practicum for students to come and kind of like see the art process or the layout process, which I also wonder, there were a lot of artists in this book. Like if you look at the list there, which also ends with an ampersand, which means someone apparently got deleted, but there's like,
Oh no.
how many? 15, 16 artists. So it might be like students from that class were invited to submit pieces or something.
Ooh.
But that would be my assumption, is that it was part of a college thing for credit.
Okay. This is weird. I'm not sure that Urban Legends shares any of the artists with the core New World of Darkness book.
Maybe not with the core, but Leaf Jones at least is a noteworthy name. And I feel like, and James Stowe, I feel like Mike Cheney, maybe a couple others. But yeah, there are several people who I don't think I've seen before or since, so I can believe they might have been students.
Maybe we should do an art episode someday so we can give all of these people their due.
Yeah. So then the introduction. It suggests here that each author did a chapter on a different urban legend and interpreted it in their own way, sometimes as a scenario for play, sometimes as more fleshed out stories, sometimes as a combination. And going into this, I wasn't really sure how that difference would shake out, but each chapter really did feel like it had a different structure, for better or worse. There were ones I definitely thought worked better than others. It is also a mortal focused book. The intro insists that it provides more help to the storyteller for managing those games than other World of Darkness books do. A bold claim. But it points out that it will have read along text and sidebars of tips. So,
I love this introduction. I love a book that lays out what it expects the reader to do with it. My favorite note is that you are invited to play as either the usual protagonists from the legend, dealing with the weirdness happening to them presently, or you could play as somebody investigating the aftermath. Readers are going to want that flexibility because some people will want it one way or the other. And by and large, I think you're going to be able to have it both ways here. Curiously, children are suggested as protagonists due to their credulity.
yeah, I mean, I wouldn't do it personally, but it does fit with the fact that urban legends are often kind of grounded in adolescent concerns and circulate among children. I mean, just like fairy tales. So, but yeah, use with caution if you go in that direction. And there are useful tips here for kind of recasting the legends as you need. It points to local colors, like the title of the sidebar, like recast it for the geographic space. But I think some of that pointing towards child protagonists, you can also make it for adults without too much difficulty.
And I love the idea of making a chronicle that is entirely about exploring urban legends.
Yeah. Although again, I think some can be sustained longer than others, in my opinion. But the ones we're going to get here include unwilling organ donors, the Jersey Devil, Bloody Mary, alligators in the sewers, and doppelgangers. And then the last chapter is just a grab bag.
I had an idea of what to expect coming into these chapters. In some cases, I learned some things about a legend.
Mm.
In other cases, I learned something about the sewer systems of our world.
Yeah. No, I mean, like, certainly some research was done. I can agree with that.
Before we go on, I have to give a shout out to the cover piece for the introduction, which has a gentleman in a curiously tall room plastered with posters, backed up against a wall, holding a plugged in laptop, its glowing screen illuminating him in diabolical light, a terrified expression on his face as he reaches down with a crooked finger to press a button.
Dum dum dum. There's strong X-Files vibes through this entire book, I feel.
I think that going a little extra with these chapters was a good move for the book.
It almost has to be a little bit because, I would say most players coming into the world of darkness aren't coming into it with the expectation that a mortal game is going to be as engaging or full of horror or whatever as like a vampire game. And I don't think it necessarily needs to be over the top when you're actually playing it, but to make that sell, it probably does.
For folks who want a grounded look at horror, I think our first story is surprisingly good for that one.
Mm.
Look,
Well,
it
let's get
has
into it.
our first story is unwilling organ donors,
Yeah.
and we'll get into it. There are supernatural elements, but the core theme of it is something you could have stripped out these supernatural elements, and I don't think anybody would have noticed.
Yeah, probably not. Because it's your classic get knocked out, wake up in a bathtub full of ice with a kidney missing story. Because I think I would be hard pressed to develop an entire story off this trope. There's a bit on page 15 that I underlined here. It's like, oh, to adapt this legend, you only need to do two things: add a dose of the supernatural and make the story personally dramatic. I dare say that's what you should be doing for every damn game. Like, that's the
I,
point of the World of Darkness.
I had similar feelings about it, but I think their intended meaning here is that unwilling organ donors is already pretty horrific on its own. What do you need to add to make it a World of Darkness story? If you're a new reader, a lot of new storytellers have a bad habit of introducing supernatural elements at every opportunity, to the
Hmm.
point that every scene is stuffed to the gills with supernatural beings. It risks making your game too complicated and also confusing the players.
Yeah.
So I think what they're saying is, hey, you just have to add a little bit of supernatural. Personally, I think you could make it that way without any actual supernatural elements in it, and they do a good job of tuning it for that one. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Tell us the broad gist of this.
Well, I mean, I think
Look, we've
that's
already covered it, haven't we?
yeah.
Never mind.
But what I
Okay,
will say is, I do agree with their approach about not making it a mystery. I think that's the right move because it's fait accompli. The kidney has been stolen, and this is very much a storyline about the investigation of that event and what it means to the person who's the victim here. It does suggest making one player's character the protagonist, and that will heighten the personal nature of the drama. But that's provided that A, your other players are fine with that, and B, you can sustain that for. Like I said, I would be hard pressed to sustain that for one session, let alone three, as the opening suggests here.
really?
Well, to an extent, because it makes one person the focus of the entire story. Unless you want to have it as a backdrop thing, or just your players are happy to go along with it. I think that most tables at which I've played, you're going to have some people who are getting bored by the end of it.
I think there's two ways of handling that. One, if you think the entire group is going to struggle with it, you could do something that unites all of them. For
Hmm.
example, the book suggests picking up a month or so after the kidney has been stolen, and your character gets up out of a hospital, calls some friends, and goes out to get revenge. Honestly, pretty cool opening. And also, great way of avoiding the horrible, horrible initial complications from having your kidney taken, which they do
Yeah,
cover.
I didn't know I needed a missing kidney flaw until this book.
So good. One thing you can do is you could say, hey, all of your characters have had the same thing happen to them. They've all had an organ taken. I suggest making it a different organ for each player character.
Hmm.
And yes, I think you could have a vital organ like a person's heart taken. And that's a good bit of World of Darkness flair because they can say, hey, my heart is gone. And when people ask, how are you walking? They go, I don't know. I want to get it back so I don't have to figure out what's going to happen.
There's also a bit somewhere in here that stuck with me where it was like, oh, maybe they had a rare third kidney they didn't even know about, and that's what got
Yes.
stolen. And I just want to run a story about that magic third kidney. But yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. I just think I think I would have a harder time selling this as a story than the others in this book, personally.
The last thing I'll say then is that the other option is just ask players why their characters are invested in what's going on, and
Mm,
people will come up with their own ideas. If it's part of an ongoing story, you don't have to worry about it because they have a established reason to be with each other. If it's a one shot, it's easy enough to say something like, we're literally all family. The person whose kidney got stolen is my husband. So yeah, I want to help him get his kidney
it
back.
just it sounds like a John Waters film, which probably would make it more fun. The theme here, the theme is so over the top. It's like, is it better to know the truth? Is safety an illusion?
It's a weird story because
Yeah.
if I lost my kidney, I would go, that sucks, but that's over and done with. I ain't getting
Well,
that
that's the
back.
thing is, at some point, somebody is going to ask all this for a damn kidney. Like,
Look, I got one left. I don't want to know what happens if I go after these people.
yeah. So we get a bit about doing research on actual organ harvesting, the biological role of kidneys. There's this emphasis on using flashbacks, which I don't know. How do you feel about that?
Well, they give us a general use of flashbacks and hints about how you can use them. I was not excited about it at first. Then I got to the section about playable flashbacks. This is cool. My favorite example from the playable flashbacks is all of them are about flashing back to the night that you got attacked. They can be used to help your character remember things about the attacker. My favorite thing, though, is there is a section about fighting back where you could fight your assailant in the flashback. Obviously, your character cannot truly win this, but if you inflict injury on your assailant in the flashback, they still have those injuries. Never mind that this is ostensibly a month later and they probably would have taken care of those naturally. It's a cool idea.
Yeah. Something I do want to point out, which they do not, is I mean, aside from using these as a storytelling structure for giving information and description, flashbacks to medical trauma is definitely something you want to discuss with your players in advance, particularly when, as the text says, the outcome is a foregone conclusion. The victim gets victimized. The text also does point out that some players will simply find that frustrating rather than triggering. So, have that negotiation, consider whether that will factor into your decision to have the events of this story happen to a player or just someone they know.
Always discuss a scenario with your players before you jump into it.
Yeah.
If it's an ongoing game where you understand what the players are like and interested in, you can keep it brief or even omit it. However,
Mhm.
you should at least have a list of themes that you know your players may have issues with so you can avoid or adjust for scenarios. For something like this, if you did it as a one shot, I would tell the players the whole premise. One of you had your kidney taken. How that works out is negotiable, but this is a vengeful story. You're going to go get that kidney back.
Hopefully. I mean, well, or whatever they
Or
want to
take
do.
vengeance. Yeah.
Yeah. We have some options for the motivation that you might want to use to get them going, such as other people kind of not bothering to investigate for them, like the EMT is saying, yeah, whatever, it's just a kidney. Uh, the nightmares, follow up dangers. I do love the art on 18 and 19 where it's like it's just these crude drawings
Oh,
of like
yeah.
anatomical instructions and it's like we need more soda. It is
It,
pretty good.
oh, it's so bad. In addition to the anatomical stuff and the comical asides, it has several sections like make sure the bowels are removed intact,
Right.
contaminate whole thing if not proper. And then above that is written, guts explode.
Yes. Don't want that. So then we get into an actual suggested story structure. Act 1, as described, is, well, it's highly descriptive with little player agency because it's really just the legends.
It's a good description.
It's a good description, but yeah, it's just the person wakes up, the person realizes the situation, the person and their allies have to sort out what happened and respond accordingly with respect to doctors, police, etc. And the text insists that you resist playing this for comic relief. I would struggle, especially with that artwork kind of on the sides there. This is also only supposed to take up 10 to 20% of the story, but there's a lot to get through here. So, manage your time carefully with this.
I don't think I would have a hard time avoiding comic relief with the opening scene. It's pretty harrowing in its description, and they hold your hand with the immediate aftermath of it, which is a good way to do things.
Yeah. Guts explode. Act 2 is the investigation proper. And the chains of investigation that you follow here, we have three main options, which are street level, secret conspiracy, and criminal empire, like in terms of who's behind the kidney theft, each of which features the same set of antagonists but with different motivations. And I did like that. I didn't like the formatting where it was all in one single bullet list, but, putting that to one side.
I love the idea for the same reasons I think you do. We have versatility both in the scale and the configuration of the pieces. If you want this to be a street level, subtly occult story, you can do that. If you want to be a global conspiracy with apocalyptic consequences, you can do that. The only thing getting in your way is the organization of this chapter, where we open with things like the gourmand, the adrenal junkie, the demon handlers. All of these sound cool. You will have no context for them until you get to the end of the chapter.
Well, and especially on page 23, so kind of wrapping up Act 2, there's this section on dramatic cost where it kind of points to willpower, morality, favors, and resources as things that are risked or spent or sunk costs of a type as you go through this investigation. And the way that they handle that, I actually really liked in the write-ups at the end, but that's several pages away from where we are now. So it's like, read through the whole thing and then kind of reference back. And so then Act 3 is when you actually confront the final antagonist, whoever it may be, and according to this book, learn a moral lesson from the tough choices and consequences. So, do you commit murder out of revenge? Do you get a flaw from this? Do you regain your magic kidney? I think maybe the story is putting too much faith in its own dramatic capacity.
I appreciate a story with confidence, but I didn't come into this one expecting to have a moral lesson. I think that the moral lesson is built into the introduction, which is be careful about accepting drinks from strangers.
Yeah, essentially, yeah.
I think once we're at the point of I'm hunting down adrenal junkies and shaking them down, we're past the point of the moral lessons for this story. Have you ever seen one of those stories where the protagonist murders their way through dozens of mooks across several scenes, and then at the very end, they confront the antagonists and let them off, saying, "No, I won't be like you. I'm not a killer. Now, excuse me, I need to go to the dry cleaners. These clothes are just washed in blood."
I can't say that I have, but it sounds like a John Wick entry. It also points to sequels here, and I'm like, I can't for the life of me imagine why I would do a sequel to this. But
Yeah, you could. If you're doing an ongoing game, you might be inspired by one of the characters or groups that you encounter along in this venture to then do a story that may be more focused upon them. That I could see, but it is also pretty lightly done compared to, say, the alligator adventure later on in this book, so you'll have to do more heavy lifting.
yeah. And those characters who we get, because they round out the chapter, we have these club burnout adrenal junkies who brew a mystic drug, rush, out of adrenal glands. We have demon handlers who use kidneys to bind demons because they are the organ of filtration, so there's some symbolism there. The gourmand is just a, quote, pathetic low-rent Hannibal Lecter, but still a basic human. And the immortal alchemist uses kidneys to sustain himself. We get stat blocks and an example character for each of those. I think out of all of these, the demon handlers are the ones that I could see sustaining through a story, because that idea of, oh, we use kidneys to trap demons, what did they use other organs for? That kind of opens the door to more exploration.
Ooh. We end with a couple stat lines for generic organ thieves. Do you want a brutal organ thief or an insidious organ thief? We have them both. I like this. I'm very bad at coming up with stats.
Organ thief stats.
Organ thief stats, man.
Yeah.
It's just.
It's not in the usual repertoire.
Yeah. Do I give them specialties and taking kidneys? I don't know.
Yeah. So overall, I can see this in the context of a mortal-focused game that really zeroes in on the morality of harming others, and I like how each antagonist presents a different moral conundrum. But as a self-contained piece, like at some point you have to step outside this, especially if you're not doing a mortal troop. If you were to connect it to Lost, you might say that changeling kidneys are the magic ingredient for alchemy, or the latest taste fixation for the gourmand, or maybe the gourmand himself is a hobgoblin, since we've seen a few cannibal antagonists already, or the alchemist is an exiled keeper. Or, as with Fearmaker's Promise, maybe stolen organs are part of a goblin contract that the local court feels they must enact for one reason or another.
I'm going to riff on that and say it could also be that the organs are being taken by a privateer who sells them to one of the true Fae because they use them to make special fetches.
I like that. So then we get to Chapter 2, The Jersey Devil. Represent. I'll admit to feeling some particular affinity with this one, having grown up near the area in question. But I'm used to the variants that say the lead's child was born in the 1700s, not the 1800s. Yeah.
I have practically no context for the Jersey Devil other than the geographic area that it is from. So I am very curious what a local. Were you born and raised in Jersey?
I sure was.
Oh, there we go.
One of the first Changeling the Dreaming games that I played in online was set in the Pine Barrens. So anyway, so the backstory here that we get for Jeramiel Leeds, he's an immortal, basically, who was born a winged monstrosity and just wants to be loved. He believes he needs a sibling who understands him, has super strength, durability, and a history of occasional rampages against livestock and occasionally people.
This is a good time to mention that this and, well, many of the other stories in this book have a content warning for child abuse and kidnapping.
Much like Lost. So, yeah. I would say, considering the story is itself about how the Jersey Devil's nature and actions are misunderstood and demonized in regards to that, it's like obviously degree doesn't necessarily matter for a content warning, but if you are a storyteller who is thinking about running it and you need to have that discussion with your players, understand the nuances of this story in terms of like what's being dealt with around the concept of neglect or around the concept of abandonment. Like if there are players for whom it's a hard line regardless, then put it to one side. If it's something that is not a hard line for players, make sure they understand the nuances and then decide whether they want to participate.
I wish that they had expounded upon that in the story itself.
Yeah.
I picked it up while reading it, but I could see plenty of storytellers going through
Missing it.
skimming. Yeah, they skim it, or it just
Yeah.
goes over their head for any reason, and
Yeah, absolutely.
then they discover it's a problem when a player says, "I'm sorry, he does what?"
Well, or to kind of elaborate on how you phrased it, child endangerment or child abuse is a theme here and in other stories as well, but it is expressed very differently in different stories. So mileage may vary even for players who say they're fine with it in different ways.
I think this one is more focused on psychological trauma.
Yes. So in this version of the tale, the Jersey Devil meets and befriends a history teacher named Murray, whose own son was tragically killed. They form a friendship that lasts for decades, but it's tested by Jeramiel's self-appointed role as protector of the children of the Pine Barrens, which means he swoops in to, quote, rescue kids. Murray covers for him when he does this and gets the kids home, but now the Jersey Devil has found a sister, heavy quotes, Linny, who has chosen to run away and hide with him. It's a lot more detailed and maybe railroady than the kidneys one, but yeah, before we get into it, thoughts?
Whew. I do not know how much of this depends upon the reader having a background with knowing the original Jersey Devil story.
It's very different, I have to
I,
say.
I thought this was strange. I think that Jeremiel is a sympathetic character, but his obsession with protecting children seems odd. I get that he has a childlike mind, but I still didn't get what prompted him to decide he needs to protect kids. I also feel like I just don't find it that interesting of a premise. I think you could have a cool story about a character who is obsessed with protecting kids, but they do a poor job of it. I just don't find Jeremiel a compelling character for that kind of tale.
Yeah, it is a little bit forced in some ways.
Forced is a good way of putting it. One thing I like though is coming up, I love the way they structure this adventure. Before we get into the specifics of it, I want to say that the first couple of scenes seem like they have little to nothing to do with everything that we've read up to this point.
Mm.
After reading the rest of the story, though, I came to appreciate those as mood setting pieces. I just wish that the story itself, again, expiated that.
So you say that, but I think they actually should be included if you're going to run this for Changeling, because the twin hooks of, I mean, slight spoilers, I suppose. Act 1 is a couple of scenes that set up the circumstances where a child goes missing and has to be found. The twin hooks of child disappearance and mysterious cryptid fit so perfectly with Changeling the Lost's vibe. That would kind of bake in motivation for the characters from the start, you know? So I agree with you that they do seem kind of tacked on here, but it works really well for Changeling. Although I did get a point of banality when they said the Wawa food market, which nobody has called it ever. Act 2, there's a couple who's going to have a baby and the husband's unhappy about it, and his name is Jake, and he's a neckbeard who's going to be significant later. And then there's Linda, whose daughter Cass is 8 years old and goes missing in this town fair to celebrate the Jersey Devil, but then she's found a bit later. So obviously Jeremiel came and rescued her, heavy quotes, and then returned her. I do like the note, there's a part where it says like the kids of the town kind of on the sly know that they have a protector, but they keep it to themselves. So it's like, that adds a dimension to it. But Act 2 presents much meatier scenes because Linny has already disappeared before the characters arrive on the scene. So this town festival for the Jersey Devil is like more subdued than it usually is because everyone's like worried about this missing girl. So those scenes that happen in Act 1, that's in the backdrop. Act 2 is where you actually start kind of investigating, going to Linny's house to speak with her father, investigating Murray the weird hermit who lives in the woods and has the suspicious habit of finding all these missing kids when they go missing. So,
I love his defense when you meet him. Just a coincidence, man. I'm just always there when the kids go missing, when they get found.
I'm just in the right place at the right time.
Conspiracy? It's wild talk.
Yeah. And then Jake the Neckbeard gets scared by the Jersey Devil appearing at his window. The thing, though, so there was a disconnect for me here because the possibility of the Jersey Devil kidnapping the kids hasn't really been highlighted in the scenes before Act 2, Scene 3, when you go talk to Murray. So page 45 has all these questions repeatedly with different answers like, do you think the Jersey Devil really exists? Do you think the Jersey Devil took Linny? And there's a letter on page 46 that the Jersey Devil wrote to Murray, implying that the interest in him goes beyond just this yearly festival. But nothing we've seen so far implies that the townsfolk think the Jersey Devil kidnapped the girl, right? Did I miss that? Or like Act 3 it comes to the fore, but before that it doesn't really show up.
No, I I think, again, this is something that the reader is expected to pick up on while reading through it,
Mm.
that people are in a downbeat because of the kidnapping, and everybody knows the legend.
I mean, I can work with it. It was just kind of like, oh, okay, right, you know. Also, as an aside, the letter that we get in Jeremiel's writing, they keep insisting on him as being like childlike, and he's saying, "Together we shall make these verdant boughs our home." Like,
I did not like the way of writing they gave him. I get that he's hundreds of years old, but he doesn't come across as childish in that.
yeah,
It seems like a creepy weirdo.
pretty much. So Act 3, after all of that, is where the pieces get put together in this Beauty and the Beast kind of way. There is some good advice to make this an extended and difficult search for Jeremiel and the kidnapped girl in a race against the rowdy townsfolk led by Jake the Neckbeard. The finale sort of depends a lot on dice rolls, each of which have kind of hedges for what could happen if you don't like the outcome. And that sort of makes me feel, what's the point? Just choose what you want to do. But I like that there are options to accommodate different table styles.
The
So,
point of it is that it gives readers options. When I read a story like this, I'm reading it because I don't want to come up with an adventure. I want somebody else to do the work for me. I also want them to give me options because, one, my players might have read the book at some point, and it's better if they don't know what's going to come. And two, I may not like the default outcome that they give us.
mm. There are a lot of loose ends after all of that. I don't know if you had any favorites here that you would. So again, we get sequels as well. So
Sure. First, if you want to run this scenario, but you are pressed for time, you could just skip to the end and say, hey, some girl's gone missing and a search party is going out into the woods. You might miss some of the emotional context that you would have gotten earlier on, but it's a good way of handling it if you are pressed for time.
yeah,
As for the possible sequels, don't think anything on here was really jumping out at me.
same.
I think the thing I wanted the most that was missing is Jeremiel maybe dies and then Lenny disappears and somehow changes and becomes a New Jersey Devil.
There is the suggestion that Patricia, Jake's wife, when her baby is born, it looks like Jeremiel. So that idea of like another one kind of growing up could get interesting. But yeah,
And the character who grew up to be the Jersey Devil had nothing to do with the scenario.
yeah, basically. So we wrap up with character descriptions and stat blocks for Jeremiel Leeds with his monstrous strength and whatnot. Linny Boyce, who's more of a story device than an NPC, with kind of an uncomfortable picture. uh, Jake Dubois, local loser neckbeard, and Murray Holbrook, local recluse scholar. I think also every character is illustrated by a different artist here, which,
Definitely. I wish that there'd been more consistency. The Jersey Devil looks very different in every single art piece.
yeah, he looks a little bit like, you remember Christopher Lloyd and Roger Rabbit? That face and that hair. But
That's so good.
overall, it's okay. I mean, that disconnect about hunting the devil for kidnapping Lenny kind of out of nowhere felt out of order to me. And similar to the organ donors one, I don't know that I could sustain the adventure by itself for very long because, like, the NPCs are so specific and fit into such specific plot points that it felt more like a proto SAS adventure than a general story framework. But I am gratified that two adventures into this book, both cases have given moral complexity under the surface and choices that the characters or that your players would have to deal with. So this story would work, as I said, particularly well for Lost's themes. So I'm absolutely going to keep it in mind whenever I get to writing my New Jersey homebrew book.
For sure, Jake is a piece of shit, but does that mean that he deserves to die? And conversely, Jeremiel is sympathetic, but he's
Questionable
he's
acts.
traumatizing people and hurting them too. If you're playing mortals, that is hard to deal with. As for how to tie this into our Changeling games, The obvious thing of Jeremiel being he could be one of the Fae who kidnaps kids because he is a Fae with a childlike mind and he's looking for playmates, and then he releases them back into the world when he forgets about them, and maybe they become monsters like he is.
Hmm.
He could also be one of the mad, the changelings who lose any sense of their identity and is now replicating what the Fae do.
I think that actually fits best.
I'm curious, do you think either this story or the one before it have a clear fit for changing the dreaming?
Eh, let me sit with it.
Okay.
Check the show notes whenever this goes out. So then, chapter 3, Bloody Mary. We have an arresting opening image. I think this is better than the cover version, but
I like this one. So we are in a boarded up room and Bloody Mary is pushing her way out of a half mirror that is set upon a bunch of cabinet drawers. There's two kids in the room. One of them is holding a candle and hiding to the side, below and out of immediate sight from Bloody Mary. And the other kid is off to the side looking terrified as Bloody Mary's arm is upon him. But the weird thing is that she isn't looking at either of them. She looks kind of like annoyed and she's trying to find something that is off screen. And it feels like she's pushing the kids away, like, hey, get out of me. I gotta find who summoned me.
gotta find a face. Yeah. So this chapter has a different structure where we get this in-universe newspaper article and commentary on the roots of the legend, then more details on those roots and game systems, and then finally the actual story.
Content warnings, drug dealing, suicide, child abuse, and child murder.
Yeah, so the author of this chapter seems really invested in presenting kids of, quote, the ghetto, which, like,
Eh,
it didn't sit well with me.
Same.
And also, I'm disappointed, but also kind of unsurprised to learn that the Linda Edwards article that they point to, which I have read and is very engaging and it is really well written, it might also sort of be bullshit.
Oh,
So, but from what I recall of that article, this chapter is probably more grounded in its vibes than its details. That idea of children of desperate means in Miami having created this mythology that circulates through homeless shelters and on the streets and everything, it is really, really fascinating. It's just kind of the question of how much of it is actually true. So,
I think it's cool basing a legend upon something grounded, but they also take pains to mix in every legend they can think of that is tangentially related to Bloody Mary.
yeah,
The Lamashtu or the Lamia get mentioned at some point. Am I remembering
we
this
get La
right?
Llorona,
Yeah.
Medea.
It's like, oh my god. At times, these are really stretches, and even when they're not, I don't think they needed to be in here. I was happy with something more focused.
Well, we do get focus in that we do get a specific character, like a specific person with a name and a face and a story, where it was, what was her name? Mary, I forget what they say her name was.
Mary Miller.
Mary Miller, that was it, who was a hard up witch who lived in front of an enormous hedge.
Hey.
Who, when given the ultimatum by her well-off lover to like hand over, what was it? He was like, give me the kids or whatever, or give me what's mine. So she sent him their faces and eyes, and drowned herself
And her children.
and her children. Yes, well, she did that before she sent their faces and eyes, and she ended up cursed to wander the space between worlds, visible only through mirrors. So I mean, there you go. That is a specific story to ground it on, whether or not you want to introduce all of the other mythological connections.
I like the ritual for summoning Bloody Mary for two reasons. The ritual itself is you turn out the lights, light a single candle, call out Bloody Mary 13 times, and then supposedly she'll do something terrible to you.
Dum dum dum.
They have an entire two-pager about how to summon her. The likelihood of summoning her depends upon how invested you are in it, and it's easier for children to summon her. It may also require multiple sessions before it happens. You're building up towards an inevitability. But the other thing that I find amusing is that because it probably will not happen on the first time, most people think, oh, nothing happens. Even if somebody does it absolutely correctly, nothing is probably going to happen.
Yeah, it takes a lot. I do want to mention that one motivation for why someone might choose to summon this deadly vengeful ghost beyond a test of bravery is to sick her on somebody else. And that's kind of the primary motivator in the story that we get.
Do they explain how you can sick her on somebody specific?
They do, but I want to leave that vague for anyone who actually wants to run this. And it gives attention to the details of things like pareidolia and confabulation and how they kind of blur memory and perception, which is a really excellent thing to highlight for the uncanny reality of the world of darkness. So I did like that there was a section about that. The bit at the end of page 59 almost has a dreaming vibe where it says the most of the kids don't know they're playing with fire, and most of them will never know. The requirements are specific enough and have a high enough failure rate that most boys and girls come through the experience with nothing more than a headache and a bit of embarrassment for being frightened without any cause. For some children, it's a rite of passage into reason. Mary doesn't appear, and thereby kills their remaining childhood superstitions and fantasies. Those are the lucky children.
You gained a point of banality. Consider yourself a lucky child.
I mean, yeah.
Oh, Puka, I just had a thought. Two things on how you could work this into dreaming. They're tied into each other. One is instead of the role that you have in the book for calling upon her, which is manipulation plus expression,
Mm.
you would make it a banality roll to see whether. I'm not sure how that would work exactly, but you do some sort of banality roll to see whether you summon her. And I think that she would work well as a nightmare chimera who may not exist until enough children spread the legend and do the ritual to bring her into existence.
Can make the roll difficulty banality plus something.
Yeah. I like that. I like that. That's good.
Yeah, and I mean, whether in Dreaming or in Lost, having her be some kind of fey power and this ritual is how she can gain access to the Autumn World or World of Darkness, whatever. Yeah. So we get into the story, which is set in St. Jamestown, a public housing project named after a poor neighborhood in Toronto. The NPCs are all involved in gang life, drugs, etc. There's a sidebar on page 62 that points to the corner for inspiration, and I'm all for David Simon callouts, but decontextualized in the context of urban fantasy horror, the level to which this story leans into gangland tropes like Crips and Bloods, crystal meth, and then builds the NPCs and the plot so completely on them, then says this section isn't meant to disparage the real people who live and work here. It feels like a flimsy defense to me. I don't dispute the desire to fairly examine realism or grit as a setting, but it's like, how much of this was really necessary? Are there other settings or other ways to present this that could have been feasible? If there are tables who feel like these are issues that are familiar to them that they want to incorporate, if they feel correctly represented by the inclusion here, go for it. But, handle with care, I would say.
I agree on all points.
So the story, even before the story begins, in the context of this setting, Mary has been called and murdered a local kid, which is motivation along several possible lines for the player characters to get involved. Act 1 gives reasons for why she might get called again, and there's a research arc to piece together the ritual and its roots. I did like the nifty sidebar on this is a case where you can allow player character bleed, allow somebody's real world knowledge of Bloody Mary as an urban legend to inform how they investigate, which I think you could kind of say for any of these urban legends.
Sorry, let their real world what inform it?
Like, I mean, I've heard of Bloody Mary as a person, so allowing that to factor into the way it's presented in game, I think is an interesting twist.
Yes. That gives me a thought. I earlier complained about how many legends they drew inspiration from for this story. I thought it felt tacked on. I think it would have been great to have a section at the end that says variations
Mhm.
and gives a rundown of variants on the legend and things that are related to Bloody Mary that players might draw on to change the location, the actors, the ritual, or what Mary is like.
Yeah, I agree with that. Better than front loading it all and trying to shoehorn it in. Anyway, Act 2 is structured along the lines of these if then consequences that follow on Mary's second killing, whomever she chooses to slay. There's some possible complications, notably the FBI arriving, even though it's Toronto, so I don't know that the FBI is allowed to go into Canada, or the outsider biker gang arriving because their drug trade is suffering. And I actually like that Mary is given some agency. Like, she knows better than to go on an active killing spree. She's not this force of nature that has no brain. She understands what she's doing to an extent.
I bet you that they put FBI because they were still thinking about this being set in Florida. Then they
Yeah, probably. Whatever. I mean, it doesn't have to be. It can be whatever city. Act 3, we get a few options for laying Mary to rest, or having that be impossible.
they all have their own difficulties, complications, and moral implications. I like that.
Yeah, yeah. Characters we get include Bloody Mary herself, a ghost with particular power, or something more mysterious than just a ghost. Then a bunch of kids, who include Jamie, the desperate innocent, Mark, the wannabe gangster, Anna, the bitter occultist, Trayvon, the prudent Crips gang leader, and his addict rival Malik, who leads the Bloods. Adults include Marla, the crackhead mother of Jamie and Malik, Louise, the reporter who's in over her head, Gary, the hard-boiled cop, and Percentage, the biker gang leader drug lord. And not all of them have full stat blocks, but it is interesting kind of looking at the morality numbers for some of these.
Even for those that don't get full stat blocks, we do get a couple of dice rolls that they are
Yeah.
somewhat skilled with.
So overall, I like the conceit of it, this supernatural horror being unleashed for very basic human reasons and others seeking to manipulate it for similarly basic human reasons like greed against a much more naturalistic gritty backdrop. I'm just less convinced about the execution, both in terms of the tropes and the fact that there's enough complication for the characters and their relationships that it feels like a David Simon series on HBO, as noted.
I agree with that, that there's a lot of different elements to this story, and a lot of them feel like they were just put together without consideration for what the final product would look like.
Or what the players might want to do. I feel like he really just wanted to write a novel. I think that might be what's going on here.
I think you're right. I hate to say it, I'm not really sure what I would do with this
Yeah.
story. I had a hard time piecing together some of the ways that supernatural elements work in this one. I think the best thing I can say is that I like that incredulity and yet that what if are a key aspect of this story. I think that is the best thing I can say about it.
I think it would work better if it were recast for Lost with Mary as a fae.
Oh, yeah.
But as it stands now, yeah, it's like, I don't know how much room players have to shape the story. Well, even if they're not mortals, I don't know. Because the structure of it, like moving from the in-universe bits to the backstory and then giving us the relevant system and then the story and the characters, I like it. It's just, it's pretty set in what it is. So
It's cool to have a situation where we have this terrifying, legendary, supernatural being,
yeah,
but most of the story is about these ordinary people leading their ordinary lives, and then this thing is intruding at a weird angle. They have to deal with it, but it's not part of their day to day.
yeah. So then, chapter 4, alligators in the sewers. We just get right into it, don't we?
It's a lot. Now, you might think, alligators in the sewers, what do you do to make that supernatural? Just make them big alligators, right? Easy, done? No. This chapter is not content with that. It needs a dungeon crawl.
Yeah.
I love this chapter. It's my favorite. I'm going to gush about it if you don't interrupt me.
I'll warn you now that it was not my favorite. But again, it was more the execution than the concept itself. Because yeah, I mean, I'm all for the Lovecraftian weird aspects of this. So the basic gist here is that the city, whichever one you're using, has expanded under the aegis of Stanley construction and threatened the wetlands where alligators live, the ones that have been brought back as babies from Florida and flushed down the toilet, and they became monstrosities living in the sewers, etc. There is a primordial lizard brain that has risen up to fight back, corrupting everything around it. I think the thing is that I just kind of bounced off the writing a bit.
Oh.
Well, we get all these sort of howevers, which I've pointed to as a thing before. A random author's acknowledgments sidebar in the chapter. I don't really know why that's here. And then the reliance on other books. Like they keep referencing Second Sight, they reference Chicago. Every single sidebar, it felt like, was titled with Discovering, insert thing here. The author introduces concepts like the Egyptian god Sobek, but then immediately undercuts them by saying, oh, this isn't actually Sobek, it's Sabek. But they think it's Sobek, but it's not really. And it's like, I don't know, it just kept throwing me off.
I wonder if we'll be able to figure out over the course of this what exactly that is. I loved it. I said I was going to gush about it. I'm going to gush about it now.
All right.
Okay, so we've got that summary. The lizard brain is not something created by this event, it is an ancient entity which has, in the past, manifested itself as Sobek, the Egyptian god. The calling it Sobek is very funny to me.
Why? Why is this here?
they well, I see what they were going for, that it's meant to be, well, alligators. Where do we go back to? Oh, Sobek. That's an obvious supernatural connection. It's ridiculous. I think it's an absurd leap of logic. And yet, I love how ridiculous it is. I love that when we see Sobek later on in the adventure, he is fully wearing Egyptian regalia and hanging out inside of a tomb-like sewer system full of Egyptian hieroglyphics. It's very pulp. And speaking of pulp, you mentioned Lovecraftian. This is equally a riff on the Innsmouth look. The Innsmouth story is integral to understanding this adventure. You see, as part of this fighting back, it turns out that some mortals have, on the down and outs, have discovered the alligators in the sewer and felt what they think is Sobek talking to them. I find it weird the book says, well, maybe it's not really giving them blessings. I say, if you're going to be this ridiculous, just let it give them blessings. It's fine. After all, it doesn't take long before they go from, this man down and out got a wallet full of $100 bills and felt it was a gift from this strange god, and so he became a cultist, to, okay, well, that's pretty grounded, to everybody respects him because he can turn his head into an alligator head.
Yeah, see, you said blessings, and I was like, are you talking about the extensive psychological and physical changes that turns humans into crocs? But yeah, I guess there's also some fringe benefits along the way.
I agree with the concern about all of the sidebars. I like the author's note with the acknowledgments because I think it's sweet to give credit to the people who helped you.
Well, sure, just traditionally it's on the credits page.
I don't think he had a chance to do this one.
Yeah,
They had to
maybe
give
not.
that over. They already gave special thanks to someone else.
I guess so.
But the thing I wanted to point out is that, as you say, there are a lot of other supplements that get referenced. I like that, but I'm also familiar with those supplements more or less. If you go into this chapter without Second Sight or Chicago, you're going to be able to figure out the broad strokes of what they're talking about. And I think you can make do when you look at the stat blocks. But there are going to be elements where you go, I don't know what that is, because you do not have the book. I think that reprinting the most important elements from Second Sight may have been a better move here, given how essentially important it is to what we are dealing with.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, I've expended myself momentarily. Your turn.
Well, so I mean that otherworldly force creating those changes also is turning the sewers into Egyptian swamp-themed tunnels populated by cultists. There's actually like a short little overview on page 85 that kind of just sums up the entire situation. So here it is. A force called Sabek dwells beneath the city, specifically beneath the Riverside district, in a series of tunnels and ancient basements altered to appear in an Egyptian motif. Supernatural alligators live in the city sewers, feasting on sewage, animals, and people. The alligators are most active beneath Riverside, especially Upper Riverside. Rumors that something, alligators are indeed mentioned, lives beneath the city float around, and, when the occasional mutilated body appears, make the news. Bureaucrats and cultists do their best to discredit and deflect the rumors. Some people believe it's a serial killer is responsible for the deaths. Others think it's all a hoax. A cult called the Cult of the Nile reveres Sabek as the ancient Egyptian deity Sobek. The cult works to appease him by feeding the alligators and protecting his secret. Sabek's dark influence transforms human beings into alligators. Those afflicted with the, quote, Riverside syndrome change mentally and physically, gaining the Riverside look. Eventually, they descend into the sewers to join their brethren. So that's the entire thing in a nutshell. And then we get like 2 full pages on the mechanics of sewer design and function, which is indeed useful. From the mechanics of using a crowbar to pry open a manhole to the legal penalties for doing so, the health effects of hydrogen sulfide to dramatic reasons for entering the sewers in the first place. So I did appreciate that for sure.
I love that section. Everything I know about sewers and storm drains, I've learned it from here. I love the part about what happens if you piss off the cops doing it, because they really break it down for you.
Yes.
Like, hey, don't do this. Hey, seriously, don't do this. You go to jail. Stop doing this. You come back again. Man, what are you doing? Come on, guys.
What do you think about the syndrome itself? Like, we get a series of roles and systems that you use in order to trace its development. I don't know if you have a sense of like, is this reasonable? Does this seem like it would progress too quickly or too slowly?
Give me a second to pull up the section and reread it.
Page 88.
Yep. Dreams, thoughts, actions, physical changes, join your brothers. 5 steps, roll stamina plus resolve to see whether you require it in the first place. Okay, you make a roll every week to see whether it progresses, and there is a chance, if you get an exceptional for it, to go backwards. I think that the biggest concern here is going to be for the PCs. For
Mhm.
NPCs, I think this is eminently reasonable.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, I just
Yeah.
mean PCs.
I think for PCs, it's fine, but it's missing one thing. So, what I like about this is that midway through the adventure, when the players begin their investigation, they might think it's a mundane thing. But once they start experiencing the effects of the syndrome, they're going to get a hint that there's something supernatural. And now they are inextricably caught up in it. That part is cool. The part that is debatable to me is the inevitability of the disease.
Yeah.
Because if this goes all the way, you turn into an alligator.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Mm. So I think it would have benefited from a point saying, "Hey, if the PCs resolve this situation, then the lizard brain retreats and they can go back to normal." Or saying, "Hey, yeah, they're just screwed." We do get a small section here saying, "Hey, can it be reversed? Maybe. Probably requires supernatural stuff. Might be impossible." Okay. I can use a little
Well,
more.
but what I don't like is that it says, if it is impossible, don't tell the players. And I'm like, no, you have to tell your players if you're going to make like lasting substantive changes to their characters' bodies and minds. That needs to be a discussion.
I think the consideration also matters more in a campaign. I suspect that this and the others were mostly written as one shots in
That's
mind.
fair.
It doesn't matter if your one shot character is going to turn into an alligator 5 weeks after the adventure.
Fair. So then we get some motivations, such as a character's contact acting strange or joining the cult might clue them into what's going on, or maybe just through ordinary civic activism. And then Act 1, Scene 1 establishes possibilities for an opening scene, like the cult attempting to abduct a character, or a contact being murdered by them or one of their gators. But there's no follow up, there's no Scene 2 or Scene 3 or Act 2 or Act 3. It just gives a list of open ended stories without any structure. I don't think it's actually bad to set it up like that, but the title of that first section felt like such a fake out to
I,
me.
I have one thing that I love and one thing that I hate that are connected to what you said and inextricably connected to each other.
Okay.
Going into these sewer tunnels has an extensive treatment in here about how it gradually changes from ordinary sewers into the realm of Sobek. I love the steps along the path for this one. Everything they add in here, it's enough to take up an entire session by itself. It's perfect inspiration for wandering into the hedge, seeing reality change around you. Or, I think, even winding up in the freehold of one of the lost from Changeling the Dreaming. Sobek could be one of them. The problem with this is it ends with you having an encounter with a bunch of cultists, a bunch of alligators, and the living incarnation of the lizard brain, which has, let me check, power 10, finesse 9, resistance 10. I must repeat, you're playing ordinary humans, presumably. They don't give any mention in this, I think, or any other chapter about playing werewolves, vampires, or mages, or using these as transitions to being those supernatural types. Much as I love this chapter, I don't know how you win.
Yeah.
It's a horror game. You don't have to win, but this just seems hopeless. It would have benefited if they had some section that said either here's how you win or hey, this is probably hopeless, but here's what you can still accomplish before your one-shot characters are devoured.
I mean, it does give you those final finishing options where it's like, oh, maybe if you wipe out the alligators or find alternatives, dispersing the cult might rob him of his power. Like, yeah, but there's no concrete statement on that.
It's saying if you manage to defeat the threats, then it
Right.
ends cool.
Job well done.
How do I defeat a bunch of alligators on their home territory with a manifest powerful spirit backing them up and a cult?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, the options for like getting into this were certainly much more interesting and I like the open-endedness and I like that they're not all mutually exclusive, but yeah, this is a story that's much easier to start than to finish. And maybe it is something that needs to linger in the background over the course of a chronicle, and maybe your characters do need to be supernaturally empowered in some way. STs, you'll have to do a lot of the nuts and bolts yourself. That's the takeaway for me.
Ending thought, if you were doing this for dreaming, you could have mortals in the background as the premise for going on this adventure. And then the Changeling characters hear about mortals who are investigating alligators in the sewers, which sounds weird and eventually leads them on the trail of this supernatural element. Food for thought.
I dig that. The cast we get at the end to round out the chapter, we get the Lizard Brain, a reality-bending horror that is a primordial expression of survival. Sabek, not Sobek, its incarnation, a powerful crop god spirit worshipped by the cult. Sewergators, whether they are natural or syndrome-altered humans, they are quite large specimens. Daniel Montgomery, the high priest of the cult of the Nile, balanced between human and gator who can do spells. The garden variety cultists, who are just themselves. Donna Angstrom, the callous bureaucrat who's pro gentrification and anti homeless. And Kenny Gwynn, the chief animal control officer and whistleblower. In my opinion, the true hero of this scenario.
Yeah, the political thriller angle was a surprise, but I could see a group really liking that.
I actually really like that. I think that would be compulsory if I were to run this story. It would have to be some kind of balance between the two. But overall, I wasn't wild about this one. Like, the details for the sewer setting were solid. The variety of options for mixing and matching are good. But the storytellers having to do like so much heavy lifting to make this work compared with well, maybe with the exception of the Bloody Mary chapter. I suppose an obvious changeling inroad, another one would be having the True Face setting up shop in the sewers and Daniel as like their beast privateer emissary. Because I think thematically, when you point to the Lost being transformed by external or otherworldly forces, and you hold that up against human evil that might actually be much worse, that is a good way to approach the scenario. And I think Lost handles that thematic line well. But I think, for me at least, the writing and presentation of the chapter got too much in the way of detailing that angle.
And I conversely felt like, God, there's so many stories that I could tell with this, whether it's mortals or changing the lost more than dreaming. But I guess that comes down to taste.
Yeah, I don't think I hated it. I felt the least enthusiastic about this one, probably. Sharply contrasting with the next chapter, which I think is absolutely my favorite.
Yes, I feel like this is the easy chapter because
Oh, all right.
okay, it's easy because it's about doppelgangers. I've learned a lot about doppelgangers, but my first thought was, well, there's no trouble connecting this concept to changing the lost. They're just fetches. I do have more thoughts than that pithy statement on it. And I do think that we are in for a bizarre and insightful ride with the story. You seem really excited, so go for it.
Well, I think it's because I'm a Twin Peaks fan, and especially if you've seen Twin Peaks: The Return. I mean, this is like pure. This is exactly the kind of thing I like. It's a good opening story. I'll say that first, but talk about burying the lead. Sheesh. Because you have the twist at the end, and it's like you would think that if some guy were kind of talking about this, he would get to that bit first. Anyway, I like how they're presented as essentially these non sentient forces who manifest in the vicinity of, and perhaps are drawn to, existential dilemmas or crises of faith in the true sense of like two choices. And New World of Darkness really allows that mirroring that the doppelganger represents to be mechanized. And they lean into it in several ways. It's like, okay, the doppelganger's morality is equal to 10 minus the characters. They wholly express the unexpressed virtue or vice of the character. Their derangements are founded on the characters. All of the stuff they do supersedes actual morality rules. And there are these interesting details about they need to fuel their corporeal existence with willpower. They have this tell that echoes it's the person who is their source, and they have this sense of superiority. They're able to procreate by creating other existential dilemmas. Like, all of the features here point to this entity that I find really fascinating to introduce subtly into a chronicle. So I like that. And having them be mortal focused helps make the World of Darkness feel unsettling for everyone. These are very mundane, weird entities. Like, I could see this working for ordinary humans maybe better than most of the others in this book.
Other than their likely lack of restraint and their murderous impulses, they are mostly normal. The treatment of them and their stats is exhaustive. We learn about their exact morality, their derangements, their ability or inability to diverge from their new routine and personality, how hard it is to track them when they use their magical disappearing trick, how to force them disappear, what their goals are, and 5 ways to kill them.
Yeah, like you could run a whole doppelganger game on the basis of this. Although one note is that with the tell, I think they might have gotten the penalties on the roll backwards, but I'm not sure.
Penalties -2 if the character is a lover or close family member of the original.
Like if you have more familiarity, shouldn't that add to the roll to recognize the double?
Yeah, I see the problem here that the last line is if the observer is only an acquaintance of the original, the roll is automatically reduced to a chance die, which makes sense. The idea is that you are being forced to make a roll no matter what because the tell is subtle.
Yeah.
And everybody, literally everybody takes a penalty
Oh, I see what
to
you're saying.
notice the tell. There we go.
Okay, okay. I got what you're saying. Another thing is that I understand why they hash out which powers are necessary to detect their metaphysical nature, but I wouldn't want players to fixate on, like, we have to figure out which one is the original, because I think that distracts from the moral point of these stories, where action and self conception matter more to some extent than which one is, quote, real. Like, when you look at media or literature that examines the concept of the double, So like Jekyll and Hyde or other David Lynch things or Black Swan or whatever. Like, it's not that figuring out which one is the true person doesn't matter, but it's not the only thing that matters. And I think leaning into that can inspire the motivations for getting into this story for the characters.
Do they discuss that aspect of it in this story? I don't remember them giving that any focus. I like it.
Which part?
Your point about the moral implications of the duplicate rather
Oh,
than
yeah. Oh, I think so. I mean, certainly in the way that, well, skipping ahead to the end, one thing I really liked is that after the actual characters in the story, they have all of these other potential archetypes for a doppelganger. So, like the crazy girlfriend, the bad cop, the good son, all these things. And for each one, they present both a low and high morality option, which I thought was like a master stroke in terms of setting that up.
they
So,
did a good job with that. For ones where they struggle, they admit, hey, it's hard to imagine a high morality version of like the good son because
mhm.
kids rarely have enough trauma to do that. However, here it is, and it's good.
And things like basing the derangements they might have on the personality of the original and kind of showing that contrast. Like, I think all of those are the kinds of stories that I would want to tell using these rather than just figuring out which one is real. Like, I think that should be part of it too, but not the foregrounded piece. And similarly, I don't think a doppelganger should have to be a direct nemesis to the one who spawned them, even though, they kind of lean into that in the mutual annihilation angle, and it is interesting, but I don't think it should be necessary because, as we've seen with stories of fetches that you can tell in Changeling the Lost, and as a note, fetch is basically the Irish folklore term for a doppelganger. Maybe you have someone learning to live with or work around their doppelganger and they don't destroy each other. Or if you want to turn this to a Lost story, maybe you have a group of Lost who mistake a human for a changeling on the basis of encountering their doppelganger and assuming it's a fetch. Things like that can lead to kind of interesting scenarios aside from the eventual destruction. So, I mean, the destruction also makes for an interesting story in figuring out how to do it, but I'm trying to think of like alternatives. That being said, I would absolutely run with the idea that you could get a band of occultists riding psychopomp dolphins to come to the rescue and destroy a doppelganger. Because that is here.
I think you could do a Lost story where the ordinary people are the fetches and their doppelganger is instead a changeling.
Yeah, and it's definitely more effective when the doppelganger is of a player's character, like having them hear about actions they didn't do rather than having it be one of their random contacts. As always, discuss with your players, but
That is something I would love to do in a long-term game. And they don't have to be mortals or changelings. They could be any supernatural being could have a doppelganger.
mhm,
I like the idea of doing it a long-term game because the longer you play, the better you know your players and their characters. Once you understand what a character is normally like, you can introduce an inversion of them.
mhm.
It's both going to unsettle the player who sees that, and you'll also earn some kudos from your players if you are able to portray that in a convincing way that shows that you pay attention to and care about your players. What better kind of flattery?
Unless their players are jerks.
Well, we don't play with jerks, isn't that right,
Well,
Puka?
we try. We try not to. So then we get a story. Act 1 is about finding clues that something is amiss, whether because a player character detects a tell in someone they know, or that person has an alibi for some deed the players are investigating, or there's a scene of mistaken identity. Then we get a pre made story with characters and another Act 1. The doppelganger of Act 1, perhaps. But I do love the concept here. We have a criminal defense attorney who's had it, and she spawns her own vigilante double who proceeds to kill one of her clients that she feels bad about getting off for his criminal deeds. But in this opening scene, she is just violating attorney client privilege left and right.
Oh, yeah.
So,
I have a background in law, so
Yeah.
the scene where she just opens up to the player characters about what this person did is, oh boy,
Yeah, no,
you
it's like you're
cannot.
getting disbarred in the morning, Jenny.
I do appreciate that they at least take pains to make it not a given. She is stressed out,
Mhm.
intoxicated, and angry and chatting with friends. And even then, it requires a role to get her to open up about what happened. I can suspend disbelief about that occurring. Still,
Yeah.
oh boy.
So then Act 2 is after her vigilante double has killed her former client. There's the investigation. You can check out the scene of the crime, check out Jenny the attorney's apartment because she had no alibi, quiz the cab driver who drove the doppelganger around, etc. The real twist to me here would be if there's not actually a doppelganger this time, or if the players become convinced that there's no doppelganger. I don't know. I was just kind of thinking that would be fun.
Oh, you like the idea that she doesn't have an alibi, but she also claims she doesn't remember this, and in the end, you discover that she was simply lying to you and manipulating you.
Or something. And the slight hole in this with regards to like the last scene is that if the doppelganger believes she's the genuine article, how does the doppelganger, I guess, respond to everyone presumably reacting as though she's changed entirely? Because she's the opposite, right? So like people are going to notice that and point that out if they recognize her.
I thought they kind of covered that the doppelganger reacts with confusion and incredulity if somebody says that she's not the original.
Well, not that they say she's not the original, but if they remark on, there's a bit about like, oh, Jenny the attorney stopped smoking years ago, but her doppelganger is a chain smoker. So if someone's like, oh, you took up smoking again, like kind of calling attention to these little things that are odd. We don't get a lot about the doppelganger's own kind of psychological reaction to that. There's a little bit, but with the sort of more subtle bits, it's like, do they deny? It's like, what are you talking about? I've been smoking all these years or something. Like, I just don't know from the way it's presented here. But it's a minor thought that's not really that important.
I have an intuition on it, but I think one of the advantages of having these conversations is learning whether other people feel the same. And that's something that,
Yeah.
yeah, they might just not pick up when they're, you know, when you write a book, you cannot tell how everybody's going to react to it.
There's also a lot of Deep Space Nine episodes that are touch on this kind of thing. Anyway,
I think you're a big fan of Deep Space Nine. You brought that up for the Book of Grimmare too. Isn't that where you got the Selkie ritual idea?
I did. It's just so applicable to so many situations, but especially with doppelgangers. Anyway, Act 3. This is after you capture the doppelganger, which is easy enough. The trick is what you do after, because the doppelganger can easily escape when it falls unconscious. It disappears and then reforms, and it will try to force a confrontation with the real Jenny. There are some good options for the aftermath, like you get a lawyer ally who now has first-hand knowledge of the world of darkness. You have new contacts and retainers. But assuming the doppelganger is slain and Jenny survives, how in the hell is she going to explain all these shootings to the cops, is what I would like to know. Are the cops just like, oh yeah, we see doppelgangers all the time, it's fine, but who knows?
I guess that's a story for Tales from the 13th Precinct, a book that has not aged well.
Oh, skip. The cast of characters we get here includes Jenny R, the prim lawyer, and Jenny D, her avenging angel double. We get like shades of Bloodlines, the video game here.
Do you know why they went with R and D? I do not recall.
I assumed D was for doppelganger and R was for real, but I don't know.
Oh.
It's your guess is as good as mine. We also have Brad Wolsey, an entirely forgettable frat boy asshole. Gordy the bouncer, that's his whole character. He's a bouncer. Madeline Cord, Jenny's nosy neighbor and freelance writer, and Jovan Brozovic, Serbian cabbie with a stereotypical accent. Honestly, except for Jenny herself, all of these I felt were kind of forgettable, but I didn't mind because we are dealing with such an archetypal thing. Like, it's an archetype more than an urban legend. So, any story, I mean, Jenny is the important character here, and everyone else, I'm just like, yeah, but they're unimportant to figuring out how to hash out her story. But you could have better characters, I guess.
They're functional as background characters, but yeah, they're not all great. But why repeat what you've already said? I'm not your doppelganger.
Well, I mean, they provide moments for the central figure to bounce off of, and that in turn becomes a template for how you could explore arcs using the other doppelgangers at the end, or whatever you develop out of the PC's doppelganger, which all of which is well supported by all the systems we get here.
There is one I want to add, though. I thought that Madeline Cord was a surprisingly well realized character for somebody who is meant to be there for like one scene.
She's probably based on someone real.
That makes sense.
I think I would have liked to see maybe a little bit more attention to those specific themes I was talking about, and like the themes and moods of double stories and how they differ from, say, mutant crocodile cultists. But at the same time, Changeling the Lost steps neatly into that gap with its treatment of fetches. So there is a lot you can port back and forth between the concept of the fetch and the concept of the doppelganger.
I think this is a great chapter for anyone who is interested in running a very fetch heavy game in Changing the Lost. Yes, CTL gives plenty of detail in the core book and the supplements about fetches, but at least for the first edition, they're presented primarily antagonistically, and I think this does a lot to expand upon them from a different angle and give you more inspiration on how to present fetch archetypes.
And from a fundamentally mortal perspective, rather than a lost perspective.
Yeah.
Which is
Yeah,
useful.
yeah.
So yeah, probably my favorite in the book. And I would probably use Doctor of Death from these other archetypes. Dr. Death. Anyway, lastly, Chapter 6, Somebody Told Me. This is an assortment of more bite-sized legends to drop in a game. Each of them has a similar template, a smattering of history, some motivations to get characters involved, a sample story, and some variations in the legend. The question hovering over my head going into this was, would this shorter length have sufficed for all of the ones we just read? Or do these ones suffer from less elaboration?
I have a thought on that. I think we could go through all of them and say what the legend is and
Yes.
a quick summary of it, and then talk about our favorites or overall thoughts.
I've got some quick fire, not one-liners, but like two-liners for each of them if you want me to just zoom through.
Please bring it on, and I'll fill in as needed.
All right, here we go. So we have arsenic and white lace, the one about the burial dress tainted with embalming fluid that somebody else wears and dies in turn, except in this one it keeps mysteriously reappearing even after being burnt and is tied to a particular character's guilt over murdering his wife.
Kinda weak.
Then Bad Candy plays off the poisoned Halloween candy trope, a therapist who can drain off others' trauma into candy left over from a shared meal, which she then sells to fetishists. But a package goes astray and starts getting innocently distributed on Halloween night.
Fascinating and tragic.
Yeah.
Although oddly disconnected from the premise of what causes the problem.
An obvious content warning for child endangerment, but you could also go the other way and play off the Buffy episode that follows the same thing and have it just be the adults who get messed up. And oh my god, the tainted blood variation is super messed up, but perfect for a Vampire the Requiem game. Just saying. Next up, Circles in the Fields deals with crop circles and the possibility that at least one design is an entry point for an infernal figure, ends up in the hands of an amateur apocalyptic cultist kid who does a sacrifice, makes a circle, his friend dies, and a booming voice tells him he better keep making more.
Very funny that I don't think there's anything forcing him to continue doing this.
No, well, I mean, you could easily port it into Lost and have the booming voice be a keeper, if you want. But yeah.
I like that idea. My problem is that they don't actually say, they don't actually give any follow-up to this, which I guess is also appropriately tragic.
Bonus points to them, though, for using the word seriologists.
Yeah.
Gone explores the idea that people who drop out of our lives from time to time truly disappear, nommed out of existence by capital P predators. I like that getting rid of the predators requires letting somebody go intentionally, or that getting rid of it may result in random devoured people to be disgorged. But I think I'd prefer that other people are the focus of the disappearances rather than the PCs themselves.
It's a pretty rough ride. The PCs begin disappearing, and there is a way to stop it, but they don't give you any guidance on how that's going to happen.
And they don't really get into the metaphysics of it either. Also, if like the player just gives up, do they just stop playing the game? Like,
It
what do you do?
it would be over. Again, that's fantastic for a one shot because maybe
Yeah.
you just lose.
Yep. Then the hook, which is so classic that we've already seen it in Grim Fears where it was done better. It's honestly kind of a boring entry.
It's just a person who thinks the devil talks to him and he breaks out of a mental hospital. Maybe kind of supernatural. It's weird.
Also, the opening story is like the hook is just on the car. Like they don't hear anything, they don't see anything. There's no fear except like they hear this radio report and they get home and there's a hook. Big deal. The Maker's Mark plays off paranoia about LSD-laced temporary tattoos. We have a suburban drug dealer dad who makes them and discovers that adding a bit of his own blood lets him see what the tripper sees. He also has this belief that all children were told a secret by the Archangel Gabriel upon their birth, and so that leads him to use his son as a drug pusher to try and gain those secrets from the schoolmates, and the son kind of grows into the role of the pusher. Again, content warning for child endangerment that can easily be changed to just have it be focused on adults.
This is a weird, weird, weird story. It's like a Mad Libs collection of elements.
I thought it was fascinating. I was annoyed there was no follow-up on that image of the bird's wing made from metal that weeps or whatever it was.
Oh, yeah.
The Mexican pet named Fetch.
Aw.
So
It's good to get acknowledged.
So this is some kind of weird hunger rat spirit summoned and adopted by a frustrated housewife, but it happens to carry and is dying from a spiritual wasting disease that is contagious. The housewife is taking escalating steps to cure her affectionate and beloved pet. I do love the line that, quote, magic, she's decided, is about pain, anger, and will. Like, yes.
I think this is a very oddly kind of cute. I think it's meant to be a darkly comedic story like The Frighteners.
For sure, yeah. The Phantom Caller is calling from inside the house. But in this case, the caller is more of a guardian angel spawned from the ghost of a phone freak kid who merged with the phone network. It's more of a background angle than a standalone story, but it could make for an intriguing ally.
Also feels like a stretch, but whatever.
Yeah. And lastly, the vanishing hitchhiker who gets picked up. Driver lends her a jacket. She leaves, but then it turns out she's been dead for 30 years. That's basically the whole thing. She's a ghost, and the story really comes from how others react, get obsessed, see evidence of the supernatural, etc.
This one was useless to me because it's just the story. There's nothing new here.
I thought you could make it more interesting by having something more significant than the driver's jacket being taken. Like, what if she leaves with a really powerful magical token or something? But it does have a really beautiful possible option for an ending, though, where she like gets to reconcile with her mother. Maybe it's better for Geist. I don't know.
There's a variation of it in Midnight Roads that I like. They give you several supernatural ones, but that is a talk for a different episode.
Yeah. So overall, I would say these can work variably well for one-shots, kind of in the manner of X-Files Monster of the Week stuff, and some would be better for Lost than the others. My favorites were the Bad Candy one and the Maker's Mark one, just because you could get really complicated and bombastic with them in a way that I find interesting.
None of them stuck with me, but I think that goes to my major point about this chapter, which is yeah, I do wish that these were longer and more expanded upon, but I suspect that the reason they're in the back matter is because they didn't have the kind of inspiration to make these into full stories. I appreciate the effort of still including something for them. Some people are going to get something great out of this, and I think for people who are turned off by the longer stories, these shorter treatments may be exactly what you need. So feel free to skip to the back of the book if you have a session that you need to run tomorrow and you only have 10 minutes to read something.
Well, to kind of extend that to the whole book, like let's transition into our final commentary here. For the most part, I agree that the last chapter's hooks are shallow enough to just be those one-shot bite-sized pieces, and the first 5 chapters' hooks are long enough or involved enough to be those longer stories, with the possible exception, in my opinion, of the organ donors, which I think went on too long, and the LSD one at the end, which was too short to try and cram everything in. At the same time, I feel like if it had been flipped around, like if 5 different ones from the end had been spun up into full chapters, I don't know, maybe I would feel they worked just as well. I don't know. But I think that overall they feel more solid as mortal focused weirdness that creeps in at the edges of life in the world of darkness. Like, you can port them into Lost, but I think I like them better as mortal things.
Yes, I think that they are primarily intended as mortal stories. I think you could take inspiration from them for
Hmm.
changing the Lost, as we've discussed. It would just require some more work.
Well, I'll amend my statement. I think if your Lost game is particularly focused on mortal issues, which I know I've complained about before, that Lost often feels like it doesn't want to focus on those issues, these can work maybe more smoothly. So, all of the fetch inspiration in chapter 5, or recasting Bloody Mary as a keeper, or the stuff I was saying about the themes in the Jersey Devil story being really well suited for Lost. If you take that approach, I think it works well. I mean, the book was certainly worth the read in the balance. Like, I don't think it was a waste of time or anything. But yeah, I think that's my final takeaway.
My final takeaway is that this is a surprising treat. I had been sitting on this book for years and I loved so much about it. If I have complaints, it's only because there's so much that engaged me that it really got me thinking about the material. Would I actually use this for a Changing the Lost campaign? Yeah, actually, there's a few things in here that I might enjoy adapting, such as the transforming sewers.
Hmm.
However, I think I would have just as much fun putting it into a Mortal game or any other supernatural game in the Chronicles of Darkness. I think it's just a really versatile book, and that toolkit approach is playing to the system's strengths.
Right on. Just realizing now, missed opportunity to include the Mothman.
Oh my god, that's an excellent point.
That would have been perfect, right?
I don't think they have any books that cover the Mothman.
Yeah. Anyway, that's Urban Legends.
Quite the book. I had fun with this one.
Yeah. And we will have more stuff in the future.
Oh, yeah. If you like this, I do recommend checking out the rest of the first edition New World of Darkness Blue books. Most of them are very useful and can be adapted like this to almost any of the games you're going to run for Chronicles of Darkness, or even farm for ideas for Changing the Dreaming or other original World of Darkness properties.
In the meantime, if you would like to get in touch with us, your options include stopping by our Discord at discord.me/CTP, sending an email to podcast@changelingthepodcast.com, visiting us on Facebook or YouTube under Changeling the Podcast, visiting Mastodon at dice.camp/@changelingpod, or joining our Patreon at www.patreon.com/changelingthepodcast, links to all of which will be in the show notes to this episode. Once more, I have been that urban legend known as Puka.
And you've heard several legends about me today. Your dear fetch, or spirit rat, or doppelganger. I guess I'll have to respond to all three of them now.
So if we say this fewer than 13 times, it's fine, right? So
Bloody
Bloody Mary,
Mary,
Bloody
Bloody
Mary,
Mary, Bloody
Bloody
Mary,
Mary,
Bloody
Bloody
Mary,
Mary,
Bloody
Bloody
Mary,
Mary,
Bloody
Bloody
Mary,
Mary,
Bloody
Bloody
Mary,
Mary,
Bloody
Bloody
Mary,
Mary,
Bloody
Bloody
Mary,
Mary,
Bloody
Bloody
Mary.
Mary.
They say that if you listen to an episode of Changeling the podcast backwards and recite the sounds that come out, you learn a cantrip. And they say that if you string together the 100th word of the first 100 episodes, it's the password to access a secret minisode with our build of Changeling 5th edition. And they say that if you listen to all the episodes in a row without stopping, a trod will open before you. And we're not really sure who they actually are, but we're grateful for the publicity they seem to be giving us by spreading these stories around, so as long as they're not risking mental or bodily health by doing so, keep it up, they! Aside from such word-of-mouth reportage, we're also grateful for the support of our patrons, who are equally legendary, but in the sense of being really cool. They include Bad Company, Ben the Canadian, Sig Lawson Jr., Derek, Dorcadus, Elris, Henry Kraft, Eo Bull, Oreo, Roz Caboose, Rebecca P., Sandchicker, Sija, The Crew of Erebus, and Ware Buffalo. If you too would like to be considered as part of these ranks of the awesome, please consider stopping by www.patreon.com/changelingthepodcast and signing up. We also appreciate reviews on the podcast listening platform of your greatest convenience. Until next time, don't poke the cryptids and always keep your wits about you as you keep on dreaming.